Good evening, sports fans. This is George with Custom Tied Flies and Guide Service. A buddy of mine pointed out some stuff that he was curious about and had questions about. So I thought I would do a little tutorial, show you some stuff that I think a lot of the tutorial videos that are out there on the YouTube and stuff kind of take for granted that a new tire might already know. I know I kind of did. So without further ado, first thing is preparing a turkey tail for tying nymphs. Excuse me. So what I like to do, and of course there is no such thing as rules that you have to do this, but I find it helpful. I like to paint my raw turkey tails with Softex. And when I do, they come out like this. Okay? So this is pre-painted. See how the fibers want to separate and stuff? And when you paint them with Softex, it glues the fibers together, and that way they are more manageable when you're trying to make a wing case or something. So it's a pretty straightforward process. You can get Softex at most of your fly shops. You can find it online. I can get it for you. But you just take a paintbrush, get it at Walmart, and just paint it on there. You want to make sure you get, heavy, but not real heavy. You want to make sure that it soaks down into the barbs of the feather real well. And these feather barbs they'll soak that stuff right up. You can see that they are soaking it right up. And once you've painted one side, you want to flip it over and check the other side and make sure that it's soaked through. And it'll kind of stick to, I use a board, like a knee board or whatever, here at my fly tying bench, but and of course once you do that, you just pick it up, set it off someplace to dry, and once it's dry, usually takes a couple hours, and it ends up like this. And excuse me, you'll see on my tutorial for the gold-ribbed hare's ear nymph that it's pretty effective. This is acetone that I'm cleaning my brush out in. If you have a spouse or child that paints their fingernails, fingernail polish remover is acetone. You don't necessarily have to go to the hardware store and buy a jug of it, although I did. It ain't that expensive, really. Okay, so the other thing, prep work. So, measuring hackles for wet flies, woolly boogers, that kind of stuff. Okay. A good rule of thumb on measuring a hackle for a woolly booger is the widest part of the barbs on whatever feather should be about the length of your hook. Okay, so there's my hook. All right, here's my feather. I grab it up here at the tip and I stroke these back. See how these, that's the widest part of the feather. So that part right there is what's going to be sticking up when you wrap it around the hook. So you just want to measure it against the hook shank. So put the eye of the hook on the feather stem and measure it against the shank. And it would be helpful if I had that in view of the camera. You see how it's just a little bit longer than the hook shank. So this feather might be a little too big for this size hook. So try another one. Now you see how this one is about the length of the hook shank. And that's what you're looking at. That's what you're aiming for. All right. So the next thing you look at is the length. And you're going to want a feather that the tying portion is around 5 inches or so. And that'll give you enough room to get 4 or 5 wraps around your shank. And it's also going to be dependent on what size hook you're using. So, you know, if you're doing a number 8 long shank streamer hook, like a Mustad 79 580, excuse me, which is a Mustad version of a long shank. It's a 2X long, I think, or no, it's a 4X long shank streamer hook. Then you kind of got to measure accordingly, and eventually you're going to start to get an eyeball for it. The other thing is measuring hackle against a hackle gauge, which I probably should have dug out of my drawer before I started talking to you. So I'll show you. This is my hackle gauge that I use. You see this represents the stem, and then if you look real close, you can see the little gradations. Let me get that out of the way. You see the little gradations on the hackle gauge when you bend your hackle around the shank. That just gives you a general idea as to how wide the hackle is going to be when you wrap it around for your collar on your dry flies. So the rule of thumb with dry flies is 1 to 1.5 times the gap. And of course, the gap is this distance between the point and the shank. That's the gap. So if you're using say you're using a saddle hackle or a neck hackle, you want to get that feather and bend it around that little pole there on the hackle gauge, and that'll give you an idea as to what size hook it's going to be able to go on. If you use a hook that's too small for the hackle, or a hackle that's too big for the hook, is it wrong? No, man, it's fly tying. Go ask Mr. Fish. There's no such thing as wrong. Excuse me. The problem is if your collar hackle is too big, then it throws the balance off with the tail hackle. So when you're tying, normally when you're tying a dry fly with a tail, if it's a hackle fiber tail, the tail is usually about a shank length out past the bend, and then the hackle is usually 1 to 1.5 times the gap. So that way the fly sits on the water, in the surface tension of the water. If you use too short of tail fibers, then the fly is going to bend backwards and sink by the fanny, by the butt end of it, and then you'll end up with almost a parachute effect, because your hackles will be holding it up in the surface, but the rest of your fly will be down under the water, and it won't stay on top very long. If your tail's too short, your fly will sink. That's also to say that if your collar hackle is too small, your fly will sink. It's just physics. But again, it's not wrong. It's your fly. You build it how you want. Doesn't matter what we think of it. It's just fly. It doesn't. What matters is what Mr. Fish thinks. So, take your fly that you made and you're proud of because you made it with your own two little hands, and tie it to the end of a tippet and throw it at the fish. If it sinks, then look at it and ask yourself, why did it sink? Well, it probably sank either because the tail was too heavy, or the tail was too short, or the collar might have been too short. Maybe the body was not constructed in a way that it stayed up out of the water, so it didn't suck water up into the body. There's any number of reasons why it would go down. The patterns that you see that are out and about, like Catskill-style Adams dry fly. A Catskill-style Adams dry fly has been fished for well over 100 years. There's a reason why that pattern works, and why it's tried and true. You can tie whatever you want, but I stick with what's tried and true. I like creativity, and I've gotten off topic. I do that sometimes. So, if you have any questions in the future, I'm available. You can find me at custom tire at custom-tide.com. That's my email address, and you can also find my tutorials on www.custom-tied.com. Have a splash, don't forget the dash. If you like this, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And have a nice day. Bye.